Well, we're starting another Polemic Pool session. God. And Jerry, I'm going to ask you to kick this one off for us, would you?
Well, certainly. I'm Jerry Bowes, and I'm hosting this particular edition of the Polemic Pool. And I'd like to start off by just introducing the other people here about me for tonight's discussion. First of all, we've got Steve Anderson, the most affable, contrary individual I know. Steve, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. And Laura Castelletto, who proudly, pointedly puts forth her personal positions. And we have Laura is to my right here. You want to say hi?
I publicly, pointedly put forth my personal positions. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Hi, Laura. And we've got Jeffrey Saint, without whom I could not be considered the likable and reasonable one of the group. So I want to thank you for being here too, Jeffrey, and for your introduction.
We all have a job to do, and I'm glad I do mine well for you.
All right, then. And so let's launch off in tonight's Polemic Pool discussion. And,
what are we talking about tonight, Jerry?
Well, good thing that you asked, because I'm about to tell you. Because I remember that you've forgotten. Well, here we go. Here we go. And rather than putting it in a proper philosophical polemic point, what I'm going to do is just say that America seems to be getting dumber, don't you think? In other words, I'd like to discuss the dumbing of America. And I just thought I'd start out by offering a quote from the astrophysicist Carl Sagan. And that would, I hope, be a nice launch point for our discussion tonight.
Sure.
So this is the quote. This nation has gotten away from the founding... Whoops, that's not the quote. That's from Michelle Bachman. I'm saving that one.
See how dumb America's getting?
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's got notes and he can't read.
A
I
loaf
can't even
of
read
bread, cheese, gallon of milk. Oh, that's one. Okay.
All right. Well, the mirror's turned on me, and here we go anyway. So Carl Sagan said this prior to his death. The dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media. The 30-second soundbite, now down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance. The dumbing of America, true or no? Anyone?
I'd like to say that perhaps being stupid has an evolutionary advantage.
Well, that's not what the topic is about.
Well, in a sense, it may be.
No,
I'm
we're
saying
talking
if we're
the
getting
dumbing
dumber-
of America.
If
We're not
getting
talking
dumber,
about
we're
bringing.
evolving.
We're not talking about bringing stupid to the table. We're talking about dumbing down to the level of stupid.
Okay, let's make it easy for you, Jeff.
She said pointedly.
I know. That was good.
If
For those that are
Pardon the
slow,
alliteration, please.
Jeff.
if America is getting dumber and we are number one, USA number one, maybe it's because being dumb is an advantage. Maybe
Okay.
being too smart. A lot of really smart people are the ones who commit suicide, for example. Do you understand now where I went with that?
Why don't you just connect the dots and make the
Well,
Okay.
picture for
here,
me?
maybe I can connect the dots a little bit. I think Laura's actually getting to something I've run across called digenics, which is the flip of eugenics. Digenics is the assertion or elevation of a rather negative quality into a species population that becomes the mainstream. It can be dysfunctional in some fashion or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been proposed that the breeding of people with low IQs and enormous numbers becoming dominant in society is a digenic symptom of our species. It's not proven yet, but it's a point under discussion and under study.
Which is really Laura's point.
In fruit flies, scientists ran them through mazes, and the ones that were able to get through the mazes they deemed the most intelligent. Then they studied those, and they found that they were less successful at breeding.
Ah, yes. And, here's a point that I've come across that's related to the human population, that intelligence was prized in problem solving and pattern recognition in the past, in our gathering and hunting days and whatnot. But right now, it is not as prized because if the ability to get along on less information and simply get through a complex life in well, kind of an ordinary fashion, is actually more of a greater survival technique. This has been argued.
Well, you said that Steve was very
I think a
affable.
pretty-
And see, if we all use our computers and they do our thinking for us, and we're sort of all hive drones, and guys like Steve are just nice and friendly, and he has a computer to do his thinking, he could be very successful.
How many people's phone numbers do you know off the top of your head, Laura?
About none.
How about you, Jerry?
Very few.
Steve?
Don't know my
Wh-
own.
Why?
Computer knows them.
Well, if your computer doesn't know them, you have them in your smartphone. So when you want to call somebody, what do? You take out your phone. Let's just assume it's a smartphone because most are. And you go to your phone function, then you go to your contact list and you look it up. Einstein didn't know his phone number.
Right.
They asked him, how can you not know your phone number? And he said, why would I memorize something I can look up? Are we getting dumber just based on symptomology?
That's an
Or is
oxymoron.
there
Why would I
something-
memorize something I could look up? That's everything.
I thought this
No, it's not.
issue would come up. For instance, in my own field that I studied in college, history, I gotta see that in the modern technical world, technology is really, there's a real good case that made by a lot of people that it's unnecessary to study history because you can look up anything you'd like about it. You can find out the day of this happened or whatnot. I've been told to me why bother with history, because anything I want to know I can look up. However, I think there's a very strong argument that can be made that if you do not study something like history, you cannot get a sense of history. You cannot get to the point of having the aesthetics that come from studying a topic by involving oneself in that study, becoming aware of all the ins and outs, and so that you can have a perspective of where you are in time and place based upon your knowledge of the past.
But how do you acquire that knowledge of the past if you're not going to look it up from the past? You're not going to go to the future for it.
Well, you certainly use the tools that are available, but
in the present.
But you need to absorb, to be able to retain that information and build upon it in order to gain more profound insights.
You want it to be more than cerebral. You want it to be something you assimilate beyond.
The only
just
way
the
it becomes
academic
cerebral
exercise.
is through exercise.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my point.
And we're not doing that anymore, and that's our dumbing down?
I think that's part. One could say that we are leaving classical education behind.
Ah.
Now, is that to
classical
our
education.
advantage or disadvantage in our society?
Would you guys agree that that is true? Because I would agree with that for sure.
That people are dumbing down?
No, just starting.
Because I don't even agree with the premise.
I don't know if we agree about that yet, but do we
Oh,
agree
okay.
that we've left classical education behind? And
No.
because I do, definitely. I think
Oh,
that's
okay.
clear.
I think it's in a
Well, okay,
transitive state.
before we start talking about things that we haven't defined, and let's define what we mean, what you mean, Laura, by classical education. What's classical education to you?
Yeah, I don't know what that
Our
means
test
at all.
scores, United States test scores for students are down compared to other nations. If you poll people, they no longer have this background of historical, classical knowledge that they once had. That, I think we could prove that.
Well, when you say classical education, do you mean regurgitating information? Is that how we define?
Broadly speaking, it's a knowledge of history, languages,
Science.
philosophy, science, the core curriculums.
Well,
People
in that
aren't reading,
sense,
etc., etc.
well, okay, let's not confuse pedagogy, let's not confuse methodology with substance and material.
I understand your
Okay.
objection.
Well,
and-
it's not an
but-
objection. I'm saying let's distinguish what we're talking about here. Are you talking about the way we're teaching, or are you talking about what subjects we're teaching? Because you just listed off subjects.
Yes.
Well, you're right. You have a good point. I think liberal education, the traditional idea of liberal education, which is another way to define classical education, is something that's very much being diminished as something valued in our society.
So, are you saying that we're more pedagogical today than we were 50 years ago?
I'm saying we're less. Well,
I don't see much distinction at all. It's all about rote, ROTE. And, I don't see a difference at all, which is really, if anything, I would argue just the opposite that you did, that we should get away
when
from
you say you, who are you
classical
talking?
education.
You're looking at who?
Yes,
Steve.
Laura.
Okay.
I think we ought to get away from classical education.
We are, I think.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm not making value judgments at the moment as far as whether we're dumbing down and whether that's good or bad. But I am saying, with those topics, people are not focusing. Young people have other skills that weren't even invented 20
Well, let's
years
cut
ago.
to the chase. Let's find out right now. Do you or do you not think that we are dumbing down?
Did you hear that 82 people were killed in Chicago this weekend? They killed each other.
Nah, it wasn't 82.
I just got a phone call right before
Yeah,
we
I was
started
listening to
here.
NPR,
And someone
they
said
ran
that.
they ran the story. There were, I believe, 49 deaths.
Okay, it doesn't matter to me
Yeah.
the exact
Well, it's a
details.
big-
Well, I
difference.
understand it was raining bullets.
But
It pretty much was.
Chicago is a very dangerous city, and many people were shot this weekend. And the
That
United
has to do with
States,
education.
the United States
Dumbing
goes out
down?
into the world and makes friends by killing people all over the world. And you don't really need a classical education to do that. Perhaps we're more like army ants that swarm. There's one continuous type of army ant that is swarming all across the west coast of the United States, and it goes from South America all the way up to Washington.
Washington.
Okay, well, see, no, that's right there. You just demonstrated the problem with not having a classical education. You don't know where Maine is on a map.
No,
of the
I
United
corrected
Oh,
States.
myself.
come on.
Just-
She
come on,
made a
come on.
mistake.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's just a
Yeah,
mistake.
but no, I'm drawing an
Sure.
analogy. Those army ants aren't particularly smart, but they're warlike and they kill off every other, and it's one continuous nest. It's not multiple different little nests.
So are
One
the ants dumbing
huge
down? I don't
swarm.
understand your point.
Intelligence not needed except for a certain type of intelligence.
So therefore,
And I think that environmental
Bakr-
models are very interesting when I look at human beings, and I tend to view us as another type of stupid, crazy critter.
Right, of
We're
course.
monkeys.
okay.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
All right.
and
So
Abu
are we dumbing
Bakr
down?
Reflective
el-Baghdadi,
naturalism.
the leader of ISIS, now simply there's been so many iterations on this name. Now it's just the Islamic State.
Yeah.
Has called for all Muslims worldwide, to follow his leadership now. Not just those in Iraq, not just those in the cities he conquered, not just those in Syria.
Right.
All Muslims worldwide.
Good luck, buddy.
Well, that's hardly new. That's been done any number of times in the Muslim world.
It has been done. It's
I mean,
been done
those claims,
outside.
those
It's been
claims.
So
done
killing
outside
everybody
of the Muslim
didn't make
world.
friends for us?
And what I'm saying is there is, in general, a dumbing down through that type of dogmatic and theocratic rule.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want critical examination. They stifle critical examination. They'll kill you if you examine critically. Here in this country, we might kill you metaphorically, but in some countries, they'll kill you literally. There's a dumbing down that's associated, and Steve, I know, you can be as polemic as you want. I know you agree with that.
No, I know, Jeffrey, that a few weeks back you were asserting that in education today, critical analysis is not being taught.
I believe that.
You want to extend?
Yeah,
on
you
that?
know, there tends to be this move, and it's fortunately the pendulum is swinging back the other direction. But in education, we got really hooked on standardized tests, and teachers began, because of performance standards and being measured against the success of their students on these tests, of course, to only teach to the test. What are the questions on the test? This is the material I have time to cover, to the exclusion of all other material, because if you're going to grade a teacher's performance on how well their students do on these standardized tests, what do you think they're going to teach? They're going to teach to the material on the test. The question is, who's developing the material that goes into the test, and why is that what they're developing? Why did they leave all of these other things out? Why did the state of Texas's Board of Education decide to redact and resect Thomas Jefferson's role in the history of the United States because they don't want critical examination being taught because they don't want people questioning what they're trying to disseminate. And if you instill critical thinking skills, people are going to question authority, and questioning authority is a really good way towards losing control of a population of the governed.
I've had friends who have decided to raise their children Catholic, even though they are not particularly strict believers, in order to give their kids something to rebel against.
That's interesting.
Seriously.
Wow.
Seriously.
Well, and to your point, before we switched, you're a wordsman type person. Are you familiar with the word synecdoche?
Schenectady, New York?
No, synecdoche.
Synecdoche.
You're making that up,
He's-
Steve.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so
I'll tell you, the reason I'm bringing that up, and you enjoy words, synecdoche, the definition of synecdoche is you take a part of the whole and you use that to give an example of the whole. My point is, you brought up some Muslim community that's violent, and you're trying to make the point that that's proof for dumbing down of people because of a group. If that isn't
the question,
synecdoche,
no,
I don't know what is.
That's ridiculous. What Jerry asked me, and what you wanted to know too, was do I continue to agree that critical examination is being squelched? Yes, critical examination continues to be squelched, and I gave an example of why it's being squelched, both in Texas and in Iraq.
So
You don't draw any broader...
So you're concluding you must have brought it up for a reason. Is that an example of dumbing down or not?
Well, I think it is an example of dumbing
Okay.
down. When you say we're instilling
So you
a
are
form of
performing
law.
synecdoche.
No,
That's
I am
fine.
not.
I'm not.
When a group says this is the law we're putting out, and it's going to be the law of the land, and it excludes education and the access to education beyond what they feed you, you tell me what that is. That's dumbing down of people. If you can get these minds young enough and keep them from inquiring young enough, they're only going to know one thing, and it's not going to be to rebel against it. It's going to be to go along with it. Drink the Kool-Aid, if you will.
You know what? I want to flip the argument a little bit.
Please.
And say that there has always been a strain of anti-intellectualism in American history.
Of course.
Hofstadter wrote a great book on it, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. And you could be argued that we are just having the latest forms of anti-intellectualism.
Right. It's a
being
snapshot.
promoted. It's a snapshot, yes.
And smart
Oh my
people
God.
are always
Gotta be
going
real
to cry
careful.
And we've all,
about dumb people.
Listen,
right?
we have been through this time after time. Why do we have to go through it again?
Anti-intellectualism.
Go through what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, why are we going through the same cycle again? We know where it leads. We know what the end game is. If we know that ahead of time, how do we get so enraptured with the idea? How do we get caught up?
Because people don't know their history.
Oh. Yeah.
What end game are you referring to?
He's right. Every end game. I always feel that exactly what you're saying. I go, here we go. I know where it's going. Why do we have to do it? I say that all the time in my head.
Yeah, I mean, the roller coaster goes around. Some of the hills that you go up, you have to go up in order to come down, and eventually the roller coaster runs out of energy just as it gets back to the beginning, and then
progression,
more
regression.
people get on it. It's
And
it's
there's
just
dead
this
bodies under it.
enormous
The
elasticity that goes
Yes.
back and forth. And my question is, for crying out loud, it's 2014. Why are we even entertaining the idea of going backwards yet again?
Well, but then we're back to, and evidently nobody wants to either say straight out whether they think there's a dumbing down of society. So I don't think there's a dumbing down of society. Now, If you want to use snapshots from Afghanistan or whatever you want to do, you're welcome to do that. We can certainly cite examples of people being shot in Chicago if that's the example on the snapshot you want to use. I would submit that our brains are actually evolving. This is a submission. I don't know this, but you can only cut a pie into so many pieces, and perhaps our brain no longer needs to retain rote. And if we need to look up information and we need to find out when Columbus came to the America, which of course we both know that, or all of us know he didn't, at least didn't discover it.
Those are two different things,
Well,
by the
okay,
way. I'm glad you said that.
I
Yeah,
digress.
Continue.
Then, basically we're making more room for
Cat videos?
Correct.
But wouldn't that be awesome if we could look at adorable fuzzy animals more, and more of our brains were for adoring?
Oh,
Fuzzy
good
animals?
God, no! It wouldn't be better. How is looking
Don't
at...
sweat the petty things,
How-
Jeff.
oh,
Pet the
come
sweaty
on.
things.
Yeah, I get that.
That's what I do.
That's what I do.
You guys pet your sweaty things to your heart's content, and when you
By the
you know
way,
what?
we do.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
Quite
And,
content.
yeah, there's an app for that now. You don't have to do it on your own. There is an
really?
app for that. Yeah.
But I'm saying, maybe in the past
But
we had
is
to
it?
be
Is
red
it?
and tooth and claw. Maybe we don't now.
No.
We can be nice.
Listen, I mean, if you really think there's that much value in sitting around all day looking at cat videos, and I'm assuming we're talking about feline cat videos on YouTube.
Each to his own.
I mean, well, each to his own, but how is that enriching and enlightening the minds of Americans, or the minds of Europeans, or the minds of Asians, or the minds of Middle Easterns, or Africans, or anywhere you go? How does that instill critical examination? Where you go and say, well, I really didn't like that cat video. The cat was just kind of icky. Okay, that's...
You see, that's kind of relativism that you're talking
Yeah.
about. I know what I like.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate relativistic statement.
Sure, of course.
I actually come from a position where I value knowledge, where I value information and being able to use information in creative fashions to create something brand new.
So of course you want to say
when
everybody's
you
getting dumb,
hear-
right?
when,
Egghead?
listen, when you hear somebody proclaim the Earth is 6,000 years old and they know it and it's been proven,
I usually
What do
walk
you
away
do?
from that person because I can't have.
But you're
substantive
arguing against your
discussion.
argument.
No, I'm not arguing against my
Yes,
argument.
you are.
Oh,
They
I
bel-
certainly
okay,
am not.
All right, 6,000 years ago, people believed that, right? Now people believe it still, right? So
Some-
where's the dumbing down?
The dumbing
Same
down.
then?
No.
Same
no,
now.
no. 6,000 years ago, people didn't believe it. And that's the problem, isn't it? If you go back 6,000 years, I don't think you'd find very many people who were positing a 6,000-year-old Earth. The idea of a 6,000-year-old Earth is held by a very infinitesimal minority of like-minded fundamentalist creatures.
They didn't even know that the Earth was round then. We are a lot smarter than we were then.
Yeah.
The
Yet,
idea
with
that
all
we are
of
dumbed
the
down.
listen, with all of the
silly.
knowledge that we have assimilated about our own planet, there are still people that believe the Earth is 6,000 years old.
50% of Americans. Except for some reason, they now used the 10,000 year.
There is a
number.
movement towards
Smart people
10,000.
make up polls and give them to everyone so they can go, look how dumb they are.
Exactly.
No, they
They
don't.
didn't answer this
No.
question
That's
right.
that's conspiratorial thinking. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking the question:
I'm picking on smart
if all
people.
you want to do is watch cat videos, and somebody stands up and says the Earth is 6,000 years old, where do you have the critical thinking skill to challenge them and say, "How do you know that? I don't buy it."
Put my fingers in my ears and I sing the national anthem as loud as I can.
Well, they typically go back on faith, and therefore they have no need to present any kind of argument because it's based on faith. That's where it comes
And
from.
Steve, what do you think about people who take matters of faith and present them as evidenciary-based knowledge? You think they belong in straitjackets?
Perhaps. It depends on who you're. Are you asking from an individual standpoint, or
Yeah.
should we encamp them somewhere and all imprison them? No, I'm not sure exactly where you're going with that, Jeff. But any time someone makes this categorical statement that we are dumbing down America or whatever, and cite these examples to buttress their thought process, boy, you got to be really. Where's the clear thinking there? That's
Well,
what really scares
America's
me.
attention
Is someone
span-
that would jump to some conclusion based on.
I see
It's
as
predicated on symptomology.
you guys are buying into something, and I see it as simply an attention-grabbing statement.
And I
by
see it
our
as-
topic proposer,
I also
Jerry.
see
He
it-
just wants attention.
But Laura, I also see it when we talk about attention. The dumbing down of America
Yeah.
is that
Hey,
the attention span
Laura.
of Americans is getting less. It's the attention.
The dog.
Okay, I'm gonna have this
homework.
podcast on my own here because I'm the only one staying on topic. You guys go ahead.
What are you talking about, Jeffrey? Go ahead.
We lost. We
Oh
we
God,
got
it's so
distracted.
funny.
I was talking about the attention span of so many Americans has gotten, and that's what Carl Sagan was addressing there. We've gone
In
from
part.
a 30-second soundbite down to less than 30 seconds because Americans can't pay attention that long. We're a nation of what? ADHD Christians?
Oh, stop.
Oh, I'm serious. We can't pay attention for more than 30
you're
seconds.
worried. A commercial interruption.
We don't even read
I'd
books.
like to have a commercial interruption right now.
Who are you going to
Are
promote?
you feeling worried? Do you feel that life is making you anxious and that the culture is oppressing you? Well, just take a deep breath and relax.
Because
and
you're right.
Stop your bleeping thinking.
Oh yeah,
I agree.
No.
100%.
Back to our show.
Actually, you need to think more, not less. Because if you know what, when people say
Well,
I'm
that's
going
the
to pray
war.
for you,
That's the war out there.
yeah. Well, when people say I'm going to pray for you, I have no problem with people praying for me because there's no efficacy to it.
You're worried because they pray for you now?
No. I said I have no problem with somebody praying for me because there's no efficacy behind it. However, I'm not going to let somebody think for me. And yet, that's what we're being asked to do.
Well,
Our Supreme Court is thinking for us, and I don't like the thoughts they're thinking necessarily. And what I
That-
find
that's-
really
that's
amazing
not-
is that
that's
they
not
don't agree with
anything
each
new.
other either. No, but
Of
they don't
course.
agree with each other at a boots-on-the-ground level. It's not the esotericies and the nuances of the Constitution anymore. It's getting right down into how we live our lives.
Jeff,
And it frustrates
look,
me. They don't want us to think.
if you want, you have your boogeymen, and if that's
No, they're
the
not
Supreme
boogeymen.
Court, that's
No,
fine.
he does
they're
have
not.
a point.
Whoever
It's-
you
no,
want
no,
to be
no,
your
no,
boogeyman,
it is not a
that's
boogeyman.
fine.
Jesus
Here's
Christ,
what I do
you
know.
live in the U.S.
Here's
and you're
what I
subject
do-
to the supreme law of
Here's
the land,
what I
which is
do
the
know.
Constitution.
Here's
and
what-
it keeps changing in its interpretation.
All right, as
Here-
a moderator, let me jump in. Go ahead, Steve.
Here's what I do know. My daughter is clearly more intelligent than I. My grandson and granddaughter are clearly more intelligent than I. Now, that doesn't either make the argument that people are dumber or smarter. I'm just saying if I look at my world, my little micro world in my family, I don't see that generational shift to dumbing down. Now maybe it is.
Well, I think
I
I
just don't
think in
see it
some areas it is,
micro.
and in other areas it isn't. I think the generalization that we're dumbing down is probably characteristically unfair.
Here's a teeny popular culture example.
Okay.
And this is actually where I got the idea of the discussion tonight. I
Jeopardy.
read an article on the 30-year anniversary of Alex Trebek hosting Jeopardy. And then they had, sort of a little history of Jeopardy within the article, the game show, the modern game show on television. So I'm a big Jeopardy fan, and I read this
So
with
am I.
interest. And they brought up in the article where the level of difficult questions in Jeopardy have diminished over time. And they gave this example that now the number of answers that would be answered with Albert Einstein is surpassed by the number of answers that would be answered with Justin Bieber.
Okay, but therefore what?
Doesn't mean
Therefore,
anything.
the sponsors that pay Jeopardy to be on and want the audience wanting to know these TV questions or whatever, that has nothing to do with dumbing down. That has to do with profits. That has to do with making money.
Besides,
But-
it's just a different
Yeah.
body of
It-
knowledge.
It is a different body.
Bieberology.
But
It-
it does go to the point of classical information. Being knowledgeable of the liberal
Well,
arts
Jeopardy
is
has
in decline.
Jeopardy has switched from academia to pop culture in many respects.
Yes.
Back when the categories were physics and astronomy and the Bible or the Old Testament, and it was substantively academic, man, I could run the categories with or without game theory, and I did really, really well. But when it switched over to pop culture, because I'm largely illiterate in pop culture, I know who Justin Bieber is. She's cute. But
Good.
the thing is,
That's good,
I
John.
can't really answer too many questions in the pop categories, and there's lots of them that have to do
Right.
with
It's a broader mix.
Hollywood and
So
all
you
kinds
don't
of
watch
things.
Cosmos, then?
I watched some
Because
of
that's
the
a
Cosmos
dumbing down of
series.
science.
I watched
That's
some of Cosmos.
trying to get
and,
more people
and here's
Yeah.
interested.
Why should we
Yeah.
make it interesting?
But
Yeah.
yet, that's a star program in something like the History Channel, for instance, which has so many pseudoscience and pseudo-history
yeah.
programs that far outweigh actual substantive programming.
But that's because
So,
people
Jerry-
will watch those, and the more people that watch them, the more money they can get by selling advertising. And it goes directly back to what Steve said.
Yeah.
I don't think
True
it's
enough.
a true
enough. What
or
was
fair
your,
litmus.
what was your point, Laura?
I was going to ask you, do you think America's dumbing down? And do you think it's a bad thing if so?
I do think that we are becoming more segmented into classes of knowledge. That there are those people who are critical thinkers, or those people who have liberal education and have classical thinking and are broadly aware of many different bodies of knowledge that they can combine and use in problem solving. That's becoming a smaller group, and that there are greater numbers of technocrats, people who are experts in certain areas. I think our society is becoming more segmented. That's what I think is the dynamic that's going on
So back
within
in
our
the
society.
1800s, when our literacy rate was around 15%, and today, depending on how you want to define literacy, it's over 80%. That to me doesn't sound like dumbing down.
You have a great point, Steve. You have a great point.
Oh.
And
Then
I just
I'll change.
well then you'll change it. But yes, because one can argue that primary education has certainly expanded the literacy.
Oh my
rate
God,
on that. Oh my
yes.
God, yes. This is certainly true.
Give us some credit. We're not. Are we stupid? Oh, I am just flat out stupid.
It's a more recent trend that I'm actually speaking.
You know,
to.
I really don't like the use of the word stupid.
Stupid or
No,
stupid?
I don't like the use of the word stupid.
It's
I
pretty
think
stupid.
it is.
But wouldn't a stupid person use that
inappropriate.
word?
Well, you guys have used it an awful lot.
Well,
I think
rest my
I think
case.
what we're talking about, rather than stupidity,
okay.
is ignorance.
Okay.
There's,
Fair
there, I
enough.
think there's
Okay.
two kinds of ignorance, and I can completely accept one, and I really struggle with the other. There are people who are willfully ignorant. They do not want to learn. It either frightens them, or it challenges them to a level of personal motivation that they just absolutely refute and they don't aspire to.
So stupid you don't like, but dumbing down you do?
The
Dumb?
dumbing down is I don't like calling people stupid.
Okay, but dumb is okay.
I didn't say saying somebody was dumb.
You're kind of calling them lazy.
But ignorant.
Lazy,
Intellectually
they're
lazy.
intellectually lazy.
And let me
I
just say-
find a lot
Fair
of people who default to what you said earlier, Steve, Jerry. You said, well, it's a matter of faith for them, and that's where it stops. That is intellectually lazy. And the way around that is to at least understand enough about the faith you're going to let everything rest on to have an articulate conversation about it.
I look at things on a broad
They can't
view.
even do that. They don't want to go that far.
What's your broad view, Laura?
And I know that when Champlain came over from France into Canada, he
Yes.
would bring men with the intention of building forts,
Right.
getting enough food to last through the winter, and then he was going to have this wonderful colony for France.
Right.
And every year, those dudes would sit up there and fish and make some kind of booze out somehow and get drunk
And
all
fart
summer
and all kinds of things,
not
sure.
build the cabin, and they would all, like, half of them would die every winter, and he was going nuts because year after year these idiots didn't have the foresight to know that winter was coming and they needed to build good buildings. People are lazy and stupid all through history, and the only way you can get them to do anything is if those few not lazy people kick their asses. And you could go back in ancient Rome and it's the same thing. You got to, like, choke them to get
Makes
them
a-
to
makes
even.
a very good point.
But we're not just talking lazy like don't get off the couch. We're talking lazy to the point of getting yourself starved to death. That's how stupid and lazy people have always been. So I feel that today is no different than in the past, but I think we are perhaps a little smarter because I see that as the arc of history, as Martin Luther King would say. It's curving towards justice. It's curving towards a greater
Yes.
intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean,
It used to
I
curve
do
that
like
way.
that.
It's
I do
kind of
like
curving
that.
back away from it just a
yeah,
little
I
bit.
feel you're micro-analyzing because,
Oh,
but you're doing it from your own
micro-analyzing?
little spot, and
No, I am
you're
not.
smarter
I
than
am
average.
not
So
doing
of course
it
you're going to
from my own little
complain.
spot. I do
People
see
are
it
dumb. They
curving
don't
back a
appreciate
little bit.
me.
So we've
If
been
they were smarter, they'd appreciate me better.
What the hell are you talking about? We do appreciate you. I'm not
mocking
the-
you.
I-
No,
I-
Not me.
she's mocking you.
I never said nobody appreciates me.
Well, in a way, she's saying you are.
I am not saying that at all.
I'm supposed to be polemic. I'm trying. Doing my best.
Steve's the polemist here. You know, you can only have one asshole in a group, okay? Not two. Everybody needs
I
one.
plead
Nobody
guilty.
needs two. But the thing is, yes, we arc in this direction, but every now and then, if you look at the orbit of Mars, it appears to have a retrograde motion, and that was a real problem with the Polemic model of the solar system.
The polemic.
Told him he had a hard time with the math describing that apparent retrograde motion of Mars.
it's a problem of perspective.
Copernicus, when he put the sun at the center and the Earth out as the third rock from the sun, so to speak, and Mars out, he said, okay, now it makes the math a lot easier. So it appears that Mars moves backwards, even though it really doesn't. It's always moving forward. So what I'm saying is it appears that we're dumbing down, when in reality, here I sit between Dumb and Dumber, and I'm saying both of them are actually smart and smarter. You can't take symptomology and make it something more than what it is.
Well, I do like
Okay.
this, what you said, because you were actually talking about the science there being progressive as
Yes.
far as expanding our knowledge.
Yes.
Because Copernicus was wrong, too, in that
Indeed.
he, in his mathematical analysis, still had the planets circling the sun. And Kepler,
Sure.
through Bach's
Yes.
observations, was able to further define the orbits of the planets
Right.
as elliptical. And on
Yeah.
on we go in expanding our knowledge
Absolutely.
through the scientific
That's
method,
right.
for instance.
I agree.
But what I said 30 minutes ago was it's a matter of attention span, and we don't have the attention span equal to the lifespan of a gnat anymore.
What did you just say?
Want to have,
No.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I was talking. We were talking about you the whole time. Steve,
Thank
you just
you.
wake up.
Those fruit flies.
Well-
The reason they didn't reproduce was because
They were too busy running
When
the
they-
maze. They were geeks, and they
they
couldn't
were
find anyone that wanted to
nerds.
do them.
They made nerd fruit flies, and the nerds couldn't reproduce. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So I would like to jump in here and say,
All we got to do is be smart enough
to
to
reproduce.
make some babies,
Oh.
and then
Oh,
we
yeah.
can starve
That's
ourselves.
the
to death.
biological
seven,
argument.
with
The
with
biological
7.5
argument.
billion people in the
We're
world,
doing well.
there's enough non-geeks out there already.
Yes.
Aren't there?
Yes.
Now,
And the geeks are out there building bombs and figuring out who to blow up next.
And isn't that a travesty of knowledge?
So,
Isn't
when
that why we have the
when we
Nobel
have
Prize?
when we have this underclass
Yes, it
of
is.
murderous thugs that are out in the streets shooting each other, that is going, in the large perspective, they'll take out the geeks before the geeks destroy everything on their end. And I'm happy because I got sacred and profane in my life, and I enjoy them both.
And you know what?
And let everybody go to hell in a handbasket.
Let me tell you, because it's tangential. But in this, you keep wanting to go back to Chicago and the horribly bloody, violent 4th of July weekend in 2014, which it was. I'm sure it was in other cities too.
Just an example.
But what pissed me off was when they said, and I'm not going to give you the number. They said X number of these deaths were caused by police, and those are considered justified. Seriously, how dumb are we getting when we assume that somebody shot and killed by the police is always going to be a justified death?
Exactly. Who's
Especially
dumb enough
if
to fall
we're
for that?
going to listen to the police. And there's a really good story this past week, and there's a fella who goes out. He's a forensic expert, and he looks at police cases. He's an expert witness, and he said, "Here's the amazing thing: I can go in with my team, and in 3 days, in 72 hours, I can tell you which of the cops are thumpers, meaning they get their job done through physical violence. Which of the ones are skirt chasers? That means which of the ones are using their badge and authority to pick up dates. Which of the ones are always unavailable to take calls because they're always doing something else, or the call didn't come into them so they couldn't respond to it. Which of them are doing nothing but brown-nosing to get promotions?" He said, if I can do this with my team in 3 days, how is it internal affairs can't figure out who did what and why and take appropriate action when they study it for 6 months? So what I'm saying is, when I hear, well, some of those shootings were by police and therefore they're justified because the police said, well, we shot him and we had to, it was a justified killing. I'm thinking to myself, where's the critical examination? Who is standing up and saying,
I thought you were
Chief,
going to get to that.
I want to know how you value people's lives? Because it seems to me across this country, and I only want to talk about America here, across this country, we have police departments that have been dumbed down to the point where life means nothing to them. They'll take it and it'll always be in their favor to do so. And that's where the lack of critical examination and thought and challenge really scares me, because we're becoming an authoritarian state and I can't stand it.
Well, I want to jump in here because that's a wonderful story, actually, and very much to the point of our broad discussion. But I'd like to see if I can't wrap this up, because we could go on for this for quite a while. And I'd like to see if we couldn't get some final thoughts then.
Yes.
So, Steve, would you like to start off on maybe a final round of where we are on this topic?
Yeah, well, I think we all did an excellent job of explaining, how we felt about it. There's certainly examples where we do some stupid things, dumb things, ignorant things, and we're cognizant of those. And but no, I just don't see, other than a few snapshots that some have brought up, that indicates that we are dumbing down. I don't see that. I would submit, I don't have any statistics in front of me to back up what I'm saying, but if we did some studies, I would submit that they would actually indicate that we're much smarter today than we've ever been, not even close. I mean, exponentially smarter than we've been.
How about you, Laura?
Well, Steve's pretty cocky. He thinks he's exponentially smarter than he's ever been. But I
He
like
used the collective pronoun we.
Okay, me too then. I like what Jeffrey said, and I could cite more examples from that evolutionary point of view studies on human beings and heredity and aggression and how that is inherited depending on whether children, even in utero, are raised inside a peaceful mother or inside of one in an aggressive situation. So I see it as a flow of time, and I like the example of Chicago because I'm at peace with what humanity is doing on a personal level, and I'm distressed by certain things I see at a Supreme Court level or police level. But the way that I deal with that is by trying to build community around me, because I feel all of us, no matter how smart, react emotionally quite a bit, and it's what hits your buttons. We had Jeff a few weeks ago getting really upset about patriotism because it hit his buttons. Man, he's got a big brain, but when you hit his heart, it's different for all of us. So you build community around you, you build friendships, you give hugs, you love everybody, like we love everybody who listens to this thing, and that's the best you can really do. Amen.
Well, wow, I really like that.
I do. And we're going to have pie after this.
I do like that very much.
And ice cream.
I just wanted to. I'll let Jeffrey have the last word, which could go on for some time. but I just wanted to say. I just wanted to say that there are ebbs and flows in our history of this topic. I think there's been a constant lament about the younger generation being a bunch of dumbasses. And I'm as guilty as anyone of going there from time to time. I'm so glad for the scientific revolution and the expansion of scientific knowledge.
Yes.
The one area that I hold a particular concern about is that I would hate to see us be segmented into a society where an intelligentsia makes the important decision and democracy is a joke, and the rest of us are left ignorant.
Don't worry,
Well,
we'll bring
we're
the thugs
already
to
there.
stop that. But we will bring the thugs to fight against it.
Yeah, well, we're already there.
Boom.
All we're doing is refining it. I don't necessarily know that I want the last word. As I said, I can sit between dumb and dumber, and I can sit between smart and smarter. It just depends on how I choose to look at it. Carl Sagan made good points. His observations went to the attention span of the American people. We want it now. It's immediate gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Whether it's intellectual, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. Relationships don't build over the time. Interpersonal relationships don't build over the time they used to before somebody is willing to say, I love you. They don't build over the time they used to before people are willing to jump into bed and consummate their relationship. And I'm not talking like a fuddy-duddy old man or anything like that. I'm just saying we want what we want, and we want it now. And the more we want it now, the faster it's delivered to us. And the faster it's delivered to us, the lazier we become. I don't know that it makes us dumber, but I do know it makes us lazier. And it makes us lazier physically, it makes us lazier intellectually, it makes us lazier mentally, it makes us lazier emotionally. And so I would say there is a lazing down of America more than a dumbing down of America.
Very
like
nice
it.
twist.
I like that too.
I
like that.
really agree with Steve. If we look back to the beginning of the industrial age in 1650, it's actually the second, and it scares me. Because 3 agreements and I'm out. But if we look at the beginning of the industrial age in 1650, we have made so much progress since that time. And I want to call up an author that I read when I was probably 11 years old. His name's Alvin Toffler. Are you familiar with Alvin Toffler at all?
Toffler.
Future Shock,
Yes,
exactly.
there it is.
Futurist.
Very good.
And here's the thing that he said in his book, Future Shock. He said, as much as has happened from antiquity to his birth, as has happened from his birth to the time he wrote the book. And I thought about that when I was a little kid, and I thought to myself, I'll bet you the same thing is true for me. You know why I thought that at that time? We had gone from not having an astronaut in space to putting men on the moon in that time period of my life. It was very compressed.
That's a very...
And so I look at what Steve says and say, hey, we're smarter than we ever were. And I think that is true. What concerns me, and I'm not trying to be loquacious, and I'm not trying to just burn minutes on the clock, but what concerns me is the application of what we have learned.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last word I'm going to say.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. I'm going to actually steal the very last word because it reminded me of one last thing that I wanted to add before I turn it over to Steve. And that is that there are more scientists alive today than have ever existed before in our societies.
Wonderful.
And that plus the idea that if we can expand primary education through the world, and that's a big if we can expand that.
And you're not speaking primary in
not
terms
the
of
United
grammar.
States, but across the world.
But
Africa,
primary,
Asia.
you mean fundamental education.
Fundamental education.
Not a primary school education.
No,
I want to be clear on the words there. Yeah.
So the thought being that what discoveries will come forth when greater numbers, masses of people across the world are educated, what new things will be coming forth from the great throngs.
Absolutely.
So there is a positive point. Now, Steve, I understand that you have our next topic. What will that be?
Yes. Basically, we were talking a little beforehand, and the subject for our next Polemic Pool episode has to do with basically in any kind of movement, whether it's having civil rights or women having rights or animal liberation or whatever movement that you want to refer to, I submit that part of getting that advanced is through flame throwing. And that's our topic next time, that we need flamethrowers to...
You're talking linguistic flamethrowers.
Yes.
Let's be clear about this.
Yes, I am not suggesting violence, and I do not condone anyone being physically harmed. I'm talking about flamethrowing metaphorically.
Sure, incendiary language.
Yes.
Let's get into it next time.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
for listening.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks everyone. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.